Amazing twist. Billionaire discovers a hidden connection with a grieving girl at his son's grave. David Carter stood silently, the cold wind biting at his cheeks as he traced the letters engraved on his son's gravestone. The name Ethan felt heavier than lead, a constant reminder of laughter forever silenced. The mansion that had once echoed with joy now echoed only grief. A vibrant life snuffed out by an illness not understood, leaving David with nothing but chilling voids where dreams used to bloom. Today, the ache was particularly palpable as he faced another day enveloped in sorrow, trapped in memories that sculpted his reality into a monument of despair. He exhaled sharply, overwhelmed by a sudden shiver of guilt as he noticed another figure nearby. A young woman with tear-streaked cheeks and a bouquet of wilting flowers stood lost in her sorrow. David's heart lurched. She too was tethered to loss. He watched her delicate, trembling hands attempt to arrange the sad little flowers at her father's grave, the very same illness that had taken Ethan's life. Their shared anguish forged a strange connection, tying their fates together just like an invisible string woven from loss. What was this feeling flaring inside him? A flicker of hope, an ember not yet extinguished. Perhaps in her he could find fragments of solace, a bridge to cross the chasm of isolation. As they exchanged hesitant glances, something unspoken thrummed in the air, a fragile understanding that neither could articulate. "Hi, I'm David," he managed, his voice seemingly foreign to his own ears. "Emma," she whispered in response, her voice cracked like glass. And thus began their poignant conversations, seeping out from the ruins of their hearts. Each exchange unraveled layers of grief, exposing raw truths that made David confront the ugly intricacies of life. Emma's father had dedicated his life to research that had shaped the medical landscape, an icon of brilliance now lost to history. Yet David recognized something unsettling. His company had profited off discoveries that were never his, essentially robbing Emma of her father's legacy. The weight of guilt crushed him more than his son's death ever could. How could he, once celebrated for his business acumen, be so blind to the ethics of his practices? His fingers gripped his phone, the looming reality of board meetings and the cutthroat corporate world pulling him towards a chaotic distress. What if he publicly acknowledged this wrong? Would that condemnation shatter the empire he had built? His heart raced, tossing him between two worlds, the love for his son and the loss of Emma's father. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The tension mounted like a thundercloud in his chest. The board had begun murmuring about potential fallout, subtle threats masked as warnings. David felt cornered between preserving Ethan's legacy and honoring Emma's father's truth. The shackles of loyalty wrapped tighter, squeezing his resolve, forcing him to choose between the safety of his empire and the chance to heal their intersecting wounds. As evening descended, he stood at the door, staring at the documents in his hands, the remnants of a family fortune, intertwined with a painful secret. What would he choose? The truth lay heavy on his shoulders, but would revealing it cost him everything? Emma deserved the truth. Lost as she was, so was he. With every passing heartbeat, closing the door felt like closing off his last chance at redemption. The silence buzzed with unanswered questions, feelings of urgency swelling, paralyzing him with doubt. David stared at the documents, the ink blurring under the weight of his contemplation. The cold air found its way into the mansion, swirling around him like the unresolved turmoil inside. He had always considered himself a man of action, someone who relentlessly chased success. Yet here he stood, paralyzed by a mere moral choice. Was it success if it was built on the ruins of another's legacy? Emma had become a presence in his life he hadn't anticipated. Their meetings, collected breaths of shared grief, began to reshape his understanding of relationships. In her, he saw not only a grieving daughter, but a potential collaborator in seeking redemption. She ignited a spark of conviction within him, urging him out of the shadows of his own despair. But was he willing to stake everything he had for a chance at redemption? He closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of clarity. The board, the meetings, the empire he had constructed, wasn't it all predicated on an illusion? A fleeting notion of unwavering success built on the backs of those who had contributed to the very fabric of his wealth. There was a critical dichotomy forming within him, a fracture of self-identity he had never anticipated. As a billionaire, he was celebrated for shrewd decisions. As a man, he questioned the very ethics that shrouded his achievements. The silence was suddenly deafening, pressing against his thoughts until they were almost insurmountable. The walls of the mansion, adorned with accolades and historical triumphs, felt like they were closing in, rising to scrutinize him through the years of built-up pride and superficiality. David realized, feeling the heat of determination rise in him, that it was time to reassess the foundation of his legacy. With steady hands, he opened his laptop, ready to reach out to Emma. Their dialogue had opened a floodgate of thoughts. He hesitated, thumbing his way toward the draft email. It felt inconsequential. An apology, a proposal to start a foundation in memory of her father, to ensure his research continued. Perhaps even philanthropic efforts to genuinely contribute to the medical community he had once exploited. Then a wave of doubt crashed upon him. Would Emma consider his proposal an empty gesture, or would she see it for what it could be, a chance to build something real out of loss? As he typed Emily's name, he simultaneously questioned if he was merely offering an olive branch for his own salvation. An urgent ping jolted him from his thoughts. It was a message from his board advising him of an imminent meeting, a summary of the fallout they foresaw if he proceeded with any gestures perceived as weakness. David felt escalated blood rush in him. Their words echoed the same corporate rhetoric he'd grown tired of. Safeguard the financial interests. Maintain shareholder confidence. David clenched his jaw. There it was again, the battle between personal truth and corporate greed. With every passing second, he realized he had the power to redefine his narrative. But did he possess the courage? He distractedly began pacing the floor. Decision time was closing in. All he had to do was reframe his world. He could reshape the company to foster growth rather than dominance, allow ethical innovation to take root instead of fear. But the cost? Losing status and security, strained against the ideal vision of an authentic mission. The choice loomed like a precipice, the moment stretching taut. Was it time to confront the shadowy figures of his past business decisions? As the clock ticked, David realized he was no longer just a grieving father. He was on the threshold of a possible rebirth. Just then, his phone buzzed, a message from Emma wanting to meet. Could she be the catalyst for his transformation? He took a deep breath, a surge of resolve coursing through him. If he chose to act, would he finally confront the fears and failures that had shackled him for too long? The moment had arrived. The question now hung in the air. Was he ready to face the impending repercussions of his decision? David arrived at the coffee shop where he had agreed to meet Emma, the anticipation clawing at his insides, twisting his stomach. The bright atmosphere around him was a stark contrast to his turbulent thoughts, full of deliberation and doubt. The warm aroma of roasted beans filled the air, yet he felt cold, each heartbeat echoing louder than the last in his ears. Had he made a monumental mistake by deciding to reach out to her? He spotted Emma seated at a small table by the window, her eyes cast downward, tracing the rim of a cup in front of her. She looked vulnerable, the kind of fragile beauty that stirred an uneasy protectiveness in him. He couldn't help but remember the weight of their previous encounters, the grief, the shared pain, the moments of unexpected connection. There it was again, the undeniable possibility of a partnership forged in anguish. But could it blossom into something transformative? "Emma," he greeted, forcing a smile as he took a seat across from her. She looked up, surprise flashing across her face, followed by a cautious smile. "David, thank you for coming." The small talk felt hollow to him. It served merely to fill the silence as David deliberated how to divulge his intentions. He could see the uncertainty in her eyes. It was like staring into a mirror, reflecting the very conflict raging inside him. Did she sense his unease? Did she know he was torn between the corporate empire he had built and the redemption he desperately sought? "About your father," he began, clearing his throat. "I've been thinking a lot about what he meant to me, to the work we accomplished, and how I want to do right by his legacy." Emma straightened, her eyes narrowing slightly, assessing him with a mix of skepticism and hope. "What do you mean?" "I want to create a foundation in his honor," he said, each word tumbling out in a rush, "to support the research he dedicated his life to. I want to ensure that his work continues to impact lives, rather than just fading into the shadows." She blinked, processing his words, and he could practically see her grappling with disbelief. "And why would you want to do that now, after everything?" Her tone pierced through his resolve, and he fully realized how fragile this moment was. Why was he even here? Part of him sought her partnership, but another part just needed to explain, to justify his transformation. "I regret how my path has contributed to a legacy of exploitation," he confessed, his voice cracking under the weight of truth. "It doesn't feel right to move forward without acknowledging that." Emma's expression softened, but there was still a barrier between them. She wasn't naive. She must have heard those kinds of proclamations before. To her, it might sound like yet another hollow promise. But David wasn't prepared to let her view him as just another wealthy man trying to absolve his guilt. "Your father helped thousands," he continued, intensifying his appeal. "I want to honor that, not just in words, but in action. We could form a partnership. Your insights could help ensure the foundation is genuine, impactful, that it truly reflects your father's values." Surprising himself, he felt a rush of determination ignite within him. This wasn't merely about redemption. It was about constructing a meaningful future, one grounded in ethical integrity. For a while, Emma simply stared at him, and time expanded between them as she considered his proposition. Finally, she spoke, her voice low yet firm. "If you're serious about this, if you truly believe it matters, then I'll help. But understand this, if this is just a way for you to clean up your image, it won't work. I won't be part of a facade." As she laid out her terms, David felt a weight lift off his shoulders. Perhaps he was ready to confront his past and, along the way, rediscover who he was. Just as he began to ponder the possibilities, Emma added, "But first, I need to know something. What are you willing to sacrifice to make this happen?" Her question hung in the air, potent and pivotal, forcing him to confront not just his past decisions, but the future he was willing to create. The remnants of his corporate ambition clashed violently with the burgeoning sense of ethical responsibility. Could he truly abandon the ways that had brought him success for something as unpredictable as genuine connection and purpose? David inhaled sharply, steeling himself. This was no longer just about business, it was about integrity, about forging a new path forward. As this new chapter dawned, what intricacies and conflicts lay ahead? Would he find the strength to relinquish his past or be consumed by it? David squared his shoulders, feeling the weight of Emma's question pressing against him. The vibrant chatter of coffee shop patrons faded into a distant hum, and time felt suspended. The gravity of this moment wasn't lost on him. It was a pivot point, not only for their discussion, but for his entire life trajectory.
"What am I willing to sacrifice?" he echoed softly, his mind racing. The answer loomed like a specter, an amalgamation of fears and aspirations. He had always equated success with power, with wealth, with control, but now the concept seemed unbearably hollow. The foundations he'd built were built on sand, shifting and unstable, haunted by the costs of ambition. The image of his father's legacy pressed heavily on his chest. Was he ready to relinquish the very things that had defined him? "Emma," he began, his eyes locking onto hers, "I don't just want to honor your father. I want this foundation to represent a shift, a reimagining of what success means, but that requires me to dismantle parts of my identity." Her gaze remained unwavering, her expression a blend of caution and curiosity. "You speak of sacrifice, yet it's unclear what that means for you. Will you give up your company, your status?" The thought sent a shiver through him. He could picture the empty office, devoid of the buzz that accompanied his empire. His days filled with meetings, strategies, and intricacies of corporate life suddenly seemed trivial against this newfound purpose. Did leaving it behind mean losing himself? Yet holding on to it felt like chaining himself to a ghost. "I've thought about selling my stake," he admitted, the words leaving his mouth before he fully acknowledged their weight. "Allocating resources toward ethical ventures, nonprofits that align with the Foundation's mission. I want a clean break." He captured the flicker of surprise in her expression before it was coated with skepticism again. "A clean break? Just like that?" she replied, incredulous. "Aren't you afraid of losing everything? How will your life look then?" The challenge in her gaze ignited something within him. "It already looks
Empty," he argued softly yet passionately. "Didn't I come here for a purpose deeper than profit? What is life if I can't live it authentically?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. David could feel his insides shift. The flutter of hope against the scars of the past was dizzying. "I need to be more than a businessman," he continued. "I want to impact lives, build upon ideals that matter. It's time to shift my perspective, not just for me, but out of respect for your father's vision." She leaned back slightly, clearly weighing his words, searching for echoes of commitment in their intricacies. David felt her skepticism transform into contemplation and then gradually tentative openness. "What about those you'll leave behind?" she asked, tapping at the core of his hidden insecurities. "Your colleagues? Friends? What will they think? They'll see you as a failure." Doubt crept back in, twisting around his resolve. The echoes of their judgments, the whispers of his so-called friends shadowed his thoughts. Could he handle such scrutiny? Yet it reinforced the very contrast he sought to navigate, the tension between personal redemption and societal expectations. "Maybe I'd rather fail honestly than succeed unethically," he countered, though the uncertainty lingered. "Isn't vulnerability a part of real connection?" Emma nodded, her silence betraying her inward conflict. He could see her assessing the depths of his revelation, reconsidering the man sitting before her. Was he merely a rich man seeking absolution, or was there a genuine heart striving for redemption? The coffee shop, alive with warmth and chatter, felt paradoxically isolating. David's confidence surged as he envisioned the foundation taking shape. The work ahead defined not by competition, but by collaboration, community, and genuine impact. But as he made this promise to himself, a familiar fear clawed at the edges. If he did commit to this shift, how would he handle those who might oppose or criticize? The stakes were rising, and he needed tangible steps. "Let's start small," he suggested suddenly. "We can organize a community event, perhaps a forum, gathering insights on how to honor your father's work. It symbolizes our partnership and can demonstrate the depth of the movement we want to create." Emma's eyes twinkled with a hint of excitement and doubt, but then she nodded. "All right, but understand, even the small steps require thought and sacrifice. We'll need to be strategic." There it was, a plan. Yet beneath the exhilaration lay a gnawing uncertainty.
Would they face resistance from the very people he once aligned himself with? Could he, in good faith, build what he envisioned? As they discussed logistics, uncertainty danced at the corners of his mind. Who would he become in this endeavor? Would he emerge stronger or simply stripped bare, unveiling vulnerabilities he had long shielded? Just as the conversation seemed to flourish, Emma paused, recommitting her gaze to his. "David, once you step into this world, there's no turning back." Her words felt like a warning, a clarion call.
A truth he had yet to fully realize. In that moment of looming realization, he knew he was on the brink of a life-altering choice that could reshape his identity forever. But as he looked at Emma, sharing this path, he couldn't help but wonder, would he find himself in a tapestry of newfound purpose, or would the threads of his past ensnare him once more? David stared at the remnants of his coffee, the once steaming cup now a cold reflection of the turmoil surging through him. Emma's words echoed in his mind, each syllable a finger prodding at the edges of his resolve. No turning back. The weight of that knowledge pressed heavily, intertwining with visions of his old life, a world where success was quantified in profits and closed deals. But the spark ignited within him was more potent than the fear gripping him. "David, what's next?" Emma prodded, her voice tinged with anticipation and caution. The challenge was clear. Action was required, not mere words. He needed to transform the cautious optimism of that moment into tangible steps. "I'll reach out to my network," he finally said, the determination crystallizing in his voice. "People who might understand and support these new ideas, those who aren't ensnared in the traditional mold of business." A flicker of doubt crossed Emma's face. "But aren't they the same people who will view your shift as a failure? Are you ready for that?" The question cut deep, and David's stomach twisted. He wasn't just risking business deals or social status. He was risking the identity that had fueled his ambition for years. But this wasn't merely about him anymore. It was about amplifying the voice of Emma's father and creating something with substance. The realization steered his gaze back toward the flickering candlelight around them, a soft glow that reminded him of potential illumination amid darkness. "Yes, they might see me as a failure," he acknowledged, his voice steady. "But what I might construct represents an opportunity for growth, not just for me, but for others willing to embrace change. I have to believe it's worth the risk." Emma leaned forward, intrigued. "Let's explore what those ethical ventures could look like. You need to articulate your vision clearly, not only to prove skeptics wrong, but to inspire others who might join you." With each word, her enthusiasm became infectious, stoking the embers of his determination. They discussed ideas for development, digging into potential partnerships, and ways to bring engaging conversations to the forefront. The strategic aspect excited him, revealing a hidden competency he hadn't tapped into before. The ability to motivate others, galvanizing support around the visions he and Emma were fleshing out. As they shifted gears, David felt an unexpected surge of energy. For the first time in years, he felt a transformative power in vulnerability, recognizing how it could connect people in deeper, more meaningful ways than the superficial relationships he had cultivated in his corporate life. He began mentally drafting emails and brainstorming project outlines, not only thinking but also plotting their path forward. Yet he wrestled with the paradox of this ambition. What would it mean to brand himself anew? The businessman feared failure, but the man he was becoming craved authenticity. "You seem different," Emma observed, breaking the bubble of contemplation that surrounded him. "There's a lightness to you." "I think I'm beginning to see my true self," he replied, a hesitant smile forming while he considered the profound implications of his journey. Yet, along with the promise of potential, a nagging fear crept in. What if this version of himself was merely an illusion, a veneer that could shatter under societal scrutiny? He had to confront that nagging voice of the past,
the echoes of his life drumming loudly in clarity around him. As they mapped out their first steps, including the logistics and key contacts, David surprised even himself by how easily he embraced the prospect of sharing his rawness, the fears, dreams, and uncertainties. Each tentative idea brought them closer to something tangible, a pitch to create a unique initiative that not only would honor Emma's father, but would shake the foundations of his old world. Hours passed, and the coffee shop began to empty, but their pursuit continued undeterred. Emma's excitement was palpable, and David felt a shared commitment growing between them. Just as he began outlining strategies for their proposal, Emma glanced at the time, surprised. "Looks like we've been at it for hours," she said, glancing back toward him with something akin to admiration. "But before we leave, David, understand this commitment runs deeper than business. Choose carefully what you want to manifest in your life. The stakes are high." "Then I'll have to ensure that what manifests is worthy," he replied, and the quiver of affirmation in his voice marked the turn of a new chapter in his life. He glanced back at her, ready to forge ahead, but an unsettling thought crept in. What if, at the core of this venture, he was still running from the shadows of his past? The thread pulled tight, and he found himself gripped by uncertainty as complex thoughts swirled. There was no easy path into the vulnerability he sought. The deeper he dove into this new vision, the more the ghosts of expectation loomed. Would he truly step into the unfamiliar potential, or would he remain tethered to the burdens of his previous identity? As he stood to leave, ready to face the world with renewed intention, he felt the stirrings of something profound awakening within. Once more he faced the crossroads, one path reaching toward hope, the other toward remnants of the man he used to be. What awaited him on the journey ahead? The question simmered in the backdrop of his mind, an insistent drumbeat as he and Emma exited the coffee shop together, stepping into a reality where the stakes had never felt higher. David stepped onto the asphalt, the evening air heavy with
an electric tension that mirrored his thoughts. Surrounded by the urban cacophony, he felt within him a dissonance, a clash between the man he was and the man he aspired to be. The paradigm shift wasn't just personal, it rattled the very core of his identity as a businessman, a friend, and now a prospective advocate for something deeply meaningful. Their conversation lingered in the air like the rich scent of coffee, its aftertaste leaving him both invigorated and unsettled. Committing to a vision meant shedding layers of his former self, a process that felt painfully exposing. He cast a glance at Emma beside him, still animated by the prospect of their venture, likely unaware of the turmoil brewing just beneath the surface of his calm facade. "Do you think they'll listen?" he asked, biting back the uncertainty that threatened to unmoor him. "The right people will," Emma replied, her confidence a buoy in his turbulent sea of doubts. "We just need to show them what's possible." Her unwavering belief sparked a flicker of warmth inside him, yet, alongside it, his unease loomed larger. Would they accept a new David? The man wrestling with vulnerability was at odds with the polished persona he had cultivated. The fear of being seen as inadequate clawed at him. What if his attempts at authenticity backfired? "The idea feels grand," he said hesitantly, "but also daunting. What if I can't meet their expectations, let alone my own?" "What if you could? What if this is an opportunity for growth, both for us and others?" Emma challenged, her gaze piercing through the layers of his hesitations. Each question struck chords in him like the resonant chords of a symphony waiting to unfold. His instincts wrestled with her insights. Her words were not just encouragement, but a mirror reflecting his latent strengths. He rarely questioned his ability to navigate the corporate landscape, yet here he stood, wanting to build something innately human. The shift in focus from profits to purpose felt revolutionary and terrifying. They walked in silence for a moment, the world buzzing around them, but his mind turned inward.
could he authentically step into this role? As inertia from his past threatened to shackle him, a revelation flashed through his mind. His success had often stemmed from an instinct for strategic vision, but now it required a different sort of strategy. A strategy that relied on connection, vulnerability, and a willingness to confront failure head-on. Suddenly he paused. "Emma," he began, apprehension lacing his voice, "what if I fail? Not just with this project, but in redefining who I am." The way she looked at him made him feel both vulnerable and seen, a powerful mix that further spurred his introspection. "Failure is a part of growth, David. It's an indication that you dared to step beyond the comfortable confines of your past," she responded softly, her words penetrating the cacophony surrounding them. He inhaled deeply, embracing that thought, a paradox that fueled fires of both ambition and fear. To redefine oneself was to brave the storm of scrutiny, and, more importantly, to confront self-doubt, armed with hope and determination. "Then," he said, a newfound resolve altering his tone, "I want to make my failures count. They should mean something." Emma smiled, a spark igniting in her eyes. She understood. "Let's start planning. We need to map this journey out, clear defining goals, and prepare ourselves for both success and setbacks." As they walked, they brainstormed ideas, transforming abstract aspirations into actionable steps. David began to feel anticipation pulsate through him. Dreams were morphing into plans that could create genuine impact. In that moment, potential shifted from a passive vision to active, dynamic purpose. But as their plans crystallized, the shadows of his past still echoed. Despite the burgeoning excitement, he wrestled with who would stand beside him when the tumult of self-doubt returned. "What if I need help when it gets tough?" he mused aloud. "Then you ask for it," Emma replied, unwavering. "You're not alone in this. Lean on me. Lean on your other connections. Build a network not for business alone, but for support too." Her words solidified something within him. A small knot of anxiety began to untangle. He allowed the notion of collective resilience to wash over him. It wasn't just about him confronting his past. It was about cultivating a space where he could be vulnerable while inviting growth. Yet shadows loomed larger in his mind. Could he show up as both a leader and a learner? Would he find the strength within himself when the pressure to conform returned? Ready to dive into new territory, he relished the flicker of resilience igniting within. The possibilities felt infinite, yet the fear of succumbing to his past lingered like an errant ghost. As they rounded a corner, the city lights flickered above, illuminating the path ahead. David felt adrenaline coursing through him. This wasn't just about professional growth. It was a quest for authenticity that could transform everything he had known. And then it hit him with stunning clarity. The truth he was seeking would not just emerge in the bright light of success, but would be forged in the crucible of every misstep, too. "What awaits at the other end?" David asked, glancing at Emma, the uncertainty pulling tight within him. "Only the best version of you," she replied assuredly. But as they continued, doubts loomed like specters, whispering of the hurdles yet to come. Just how deeply would he have to plunge into vulnerability to harness the potential of his journey? With each step, he felt the growing heaviness of anticipation, the inevitable reckoning of choices to be made yet unresolved. A storm on the horizon that would decide the course of his transformation. David's heart raced, not just with anticipation, but with the gravitational pull of uncertainty. The flickering lights danced overhead, but all he could focus on was the weight of Emma's words. Each step felt more like a step into the unknown, then a stride towards a brighter future. The closer they got to their goal, the more his fears manifested, coiling tightly around his resolve. "What does it mean to redefine myself?" he pondered, his mind awash with conflicting thoughts. He had always taken pride in being a man of action, driven by results and the unwavering precision of his plans. Yet, as he embarked on this new path, disruption was unavoidable.
Leaving behind the safety of his old self felt like stepping into a vast ocean, uncharted and turbulent. "So, what's next?" Emma's voice cut through his thoughts, her enthusiasm unwavering. David took a moment to marinate in the sweetness of her question. "Next, we need to present our ideas to the board." The words tasted foreign on his tongue. The boardroom had always been a battlefield where he played as a commander armed with data and persuasive charm. Stepping into that arena now felt akin to walking into a lion's den without armor, exposed and unprepared. As they arrived at a nearby cafe, David ordered coffee, the familiar scent anchoring him even as his thoughts spiraled. "What if I don't resonate with them?" he mused, raising his eyebrows. "What if the brilliance of their vision fell flat in the presence of the institution's resistant traditions?" Emma leaned across the table, her eyes holding a fire that stoked his resolve. "You have to remember that vulnerability is your strength. Show them your passion and authenticity. That's what they need to see." Her belief in him was a double-edged sword. While it ignited a flicker of hope, it also intensified the pressure. What if the genuine David they sought to reveal was simply unfit for the role he was striving towards? He rubbed his palms against the table, feeling the coolness anchoring him as if it could ground the churning thoughts in his mind. "I want to be that person," he said, vulnerability trickling into his voice. "But I fear I haven't shown that side to anyone, at least not in the ways that matter." "What if you began right here, right now?" Emma asked, her eyes glimmering with something akin to challenge. "What if you laid it all on the line, to me, to them? What's the worst that could happen?" It was a simple question, one David had asked himself countless times before, but now it rattled against the very structure of his old defenses. If he embraced his shortcomings and fears, he might be offering the world a more profound insight into who he truly was. Was that the cost of connection? Sacrificing the surface-level success that had long propped up his identity? With a tentative resolve, he replied, "I can do that. I need to learn how to be honest without flinching. They deserve that from me." Emma smiled, leaning back in your chair, satisfied. "It won't be easy, but what you've built thus far is a foundation to build from, not a wall to hide behind." Word resonated with clarity. David realized he was right on the edge of a personal revolution, the ground beneath him rearranging with every truth he contemplated. As they continued to discuss strategies, excitement and trepidation intertwined within him, creating a cadence that motivated his every thought. Yet a shocking revelation loomed closer, unacknowledged but thriving at the back of his mind. Could it be that the greatest barriers he faced were not external, but rather the perceptions he had forged within himself? That thought unraveled a new thread of dilemma. Could he confront the inner critic that had taken residence in his mind, constantly whispering doubts? "What happens when the lights fade and I'm left with just David?" he asked, a subtle fear tugging at his gut. "Then you show yourself, shadows and all," Emma replied, her voice grounding him again. "That's the mark of a true leader." Deep breaths filled his lungs as he wrestled with the collision of excitement and fear within him. The beginning of transformation demanded not just intention, but transparency, a stark confrontation with self-doubt. Yet in that moment of empowerment, the shadows still lingered, whispering questions that would not be easily silenced. Could he muster the courage to emerge truly authentic, or would fear drag him back into the safety of his old identity? "Tomorrow begins that journey," he said, forcing a smile past the encroaching doubt. But how would he rise to meet the future when the remnants of his past clawed at his confidence? As they left the cafe, the city buzzed with life around them. Yet inside, David felt a stillness amid the chaos, an unsettling calm where resolve met lingering fear. The air thrummed with anticipation of the unknown. Turning to Emma, he asked, "Will you stand beside me, even when things get tough?" "Always," she affirmed, unwavering.
For now, that promise felt like an anchor, though deep within him an urgent question surged. How deeply would he need to dig into himself to face an impending truth about who he truly was? The morning sun filtered through the office windows, bathing David in a wash of golden light that did little to dissipate the storm of uncertainty brewing within him. As he adjusted his tie, something he hadn't given a second thought to in years, he felt it constrict like a noose around his thoughts. Today was the day. He was stepping into the boardroom with Emma's words echoing in his mind. Authenticity, vulnerability. He took a moment to breathe, grounding himself in the familiar chaos of his office. Their strategy was solid, the concept innovative. But the ripple of self-doubt was unnervingly unshakable. Could he present this proposal not just as data, but as part of himself, his true self? As he walked towards the conference room, he envisioned Emma's unwavering support. She believed in him, but did that belief somehow amplify his fears? Each step felt heavier, marked by the weight of what was to come. Maybe the real challenge lay in reconciling the polished
David, the executives were accustomed to with the unguarded version who yearned to break free. Seated at the long table stood the board members, stone-faced and authoritative, the gatekeepers of his destiny. As David took his place, a voice in his mind thrummed ominously. They'd sense his hesitance and strip away his credibility like skin from bone. Clearing his throat, he launched into his presentation. He began with the usual metrics, but midway through, he paused, seized by a sudden impulse to pivot. "This project is more than numbers to me," he said, his voice steady despite the quaking apprehension in his chest. "It represents a shift, our potential to transform everything we've held as status quo. But that's not just about the company. It's about my journey toward honesty and vulnerability in leadership." He felt their eyes narrow, questioning, yet none interrupted. Maybe they were waiting for him to falter, to retract into his shell. But instead, he continued, navigating through the heart of his insecurities. "I have always hidden behind the success of our strategies, but today I stand before you as David. Not the leader you expect, but a man who realizes the limitations of his past defenses." Surprise flickered across their faces, refracted through skepticism. Perhaps they found his sincerity refreshing. Maybe it fueled their doubts. He couldn't tell. But he refused to retreat. If this was to be his moment of reckoning, he needed to embrace the silence. By integrating our personal experiences into our work, we can drive engagement that transcends numbers. If we dare to be authentic, we can inspire. And that's how we redefine not just our company, but ourselves. The air in the room thickened, charged with an intensity that felt almost electric. David could sense a shift, a collective holding of breath as the executives exchanged glances, steeped in curiosity and caution. Did they see value in his vulnerability, or was he risking everything on a gamble of weakness? As he wrapped up, he felt unexpectedly liberated. While he presented his closing arguments, the echoes of his initial fear began to wane, replaced with something new: hope, clarity, a dawning realization that the tether connecting his past failures and future aspirations could become a bridge instead of a barrier. Then, the unexpected happened. During the Q&A, Linda, one of the board members known for her sharp criticism, leaned forward. "David, if I'm understanding correctly, you're connecting this project to personal growth. What does that reveal about your leadership philosophy?" Caught off guard, he paused, slipping momentarily into his introspective mode. This was the moment of truth, where authenticity would either triumph or warrant derision. Would he falter, or would he rise? As he replied, drawing connections between vulnerability and leadership, a latent insight dawned. He had touched on something profound: the universal human experience within corporate walls. Just as they had doubts, so did he. Just as they sought a connection, he too craved it. After the meeting, the walk back to his office felt surreal. Adrenaline coursed through him, tinged with excitement and uncertainty alike. For the first time, David felt as if he had truly entered into the fight, his past and future colliding to forge a new identity. Yet in the aftermath, still buzzing from the thrill and trepidation, his phone buzzed, an alert he hadn't anticipated. A message from Emma flashed on the screen. "Are you ready for the real challenge?" His heartbeat accelerated, the pulsating tension flaring anew. What did she mean? What lay ahead that could either solidify his newfound authenticity or threaten his growth? The future began to unfurl in uncharted territory, and David realized he might have just stepped into his greatest battle yet. How could he prepare for a confrontation with himself while navigating a world that still might not embrace the man he was becoming? David returned to his office, the adrenaline slowly subsiding, leaving a profound weariness in its wake. He sank into his chair, staring blankly at his screen, the bright glow feeling almost alien now. He had unveiled a piece of himself in that meeting, and the implications were both invigorating and terrifying. Emma's message persisted in his thoughts, reiterating that the day's challenges were only the beginning. He opened his inbox, revealing a plethora of unread emails. Yet he couldn't focus on the numbers or updates. Instead, his mind spiraled back to the boardroom, the shifting gazes of his peers, and Linda's probing question lingering heavily in the air. It was as if he had just reached the tip of an iceberg of personal transformation, with the depths still to explore. "Are you ready for the real challenge?" David muttered to himself, the words echoing like an unresolved chord. What could that challenge entail? He imagined battles with self-doubt, navigating disapproval, and the fear of vulnerability. Conscious of the fine line between confidence and arrogance, he questioned what it meant to lead authentically. Would his colleagues follow him into this uncertain territory, or would they cherish the familiar, polished version of himself he had so carefully constructed? Desperate for clarity, David retrieved his journal, his private sanctuary of thoughts, dreams, and fears. Flipping to a fresh page, he scrawled, "Authenticity is more than vulnerability." What did he mean by that? He wrestled with the concept, realizing that it involved more than emotional openness. It required active engagement with the consequences of his revelations. Would he have to face pushback, or was this path paved with opportunities for connection? He was jolted from his thoughts by a knock on the door. It was Emma, her expression a mixture of excitement and concern. "I got your message about the presentation. It sounded like you really turned a corner," she said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "More like a fork in the road," David replied, running a hand through his hair. "What I did in there, what if it backfires?" Emma leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "You shared your truth, David. That's powerful. But I think it's time to face what comes next, the real challenge of leading authentically." He sighed, feeling the weight of his decisions sink in. "And what if they don't accept this version of me? How can I balance being genuine while still being effective?" "By becoming resilient," she said firmly. "You've ignited something. You've suggested a pivot beyond just the project. This is about the culture you want to create. The challenge now is sustaining that authenticity when your old habits pull you back." Her words struck a chord. David leaned back, contemplating her insight. How could he instigate genuine cultural change while still holding on to his newfound authenticity? The process would demand patience and commitment, but threatened to unravel his comfort zones. Would his history of upholding rigid authority serve as a hindrance in fostering a vulnerable work environment? David confided his fears to Emma, his voice low. "What if I trip over my own authenticity? What if it ends up costing me everything?" "Then you regroup and keep pushing forward. You didn't just stand up in that boardroom. You took a risk that many leaders shy away from. The backlash might come. And if it does, you'll need to confront it directly, with the same honesty you brought to your proposal." As their conversation continued, David felt a growing sense of determination mix with the uncertainty. He was not merely shaping a work strategy, but crafting a new paradigm for himself, a leader willing to be seen and felt, not just heard. Later that evening, the city lights twinkled outside his office window, a kaleidoscope of possibilities. But looming ahead was the real challenge Emma hinted at, a crucial meeting on the company's culture reevaluation. Would he be able to apply what he had learned and solidify this path of authenticity so quickly? As he mulled over his notes for tomorrow, excitement coursed through him. The urge to rise to Emma's call to arms pulsed stronger than fear. He felt this moment unfolding into an opportunity, fragile yet exhilarating. Suddenly, a new message from Linda pinged on his phone. He hesitated, feeling the familiar knot form in his stomach. "Let's talk about your proposal further." Was this an invitation or a precursor to confrontation? David stared at the message, caught between anticipation and dread. Either way, the journey was only just beginning. Would this lead him deeper into the complexities of his authenticity, or would he be forced to reevaluate what he was pledging to change? The answers remained elusive, but one thing was clear: he had crossed a threshold, and now he had to brace himself for what awaited on the other side. David stood in front of the giant glass windows of his office, looking out over the sprawling city. The lights twinkled like a galaxy of possibilities. Yet the heavy weight of potential repercussions pressed down on him. Today was the day he would face the board again, but not just as a businessman cloaked in statistics. He would walk.
Emma had become not just a source of encouragement, but a critical part of this newfound journey. Their discussions on the foundation dedicated to her father's legacy had matured into a vision for societal impact beyond personal redemption. Today, he would present the next phase, reevaluating the corporate culture that had long been driven by profits without empathy. As he prepared, he reflected on the contrasts between the man he used to be and who he aspired to become. The preoccupation with status and corporate dominance was melting away, revealing the workings of a man ready to confront hard truths. In doing so, he had found purpose, inviting not just his colleagues, but himself on a collective journey toward authenticity. When the board began to assemble, David felt a surge of anticipation and anxiety. The fear of rejection loomed like a storm cloud, but beside it flickered a light of determination. He had risked his reputation once. He was ready to do it again. "Welcome back, David," Linda began, her voice steady as she took her seat. The tension was palpable as the room fell silent, all eyes on him. "Thank you, everyone," he started, taking a deep breath. "Today, we have a responsibility that goes beyond balance sheets and quarterly projections. We have an opportunity to cultivate a culture that reflects our values, values that resonate with the human experience." Their eyes narrowed slightly, the air vibrating with controlled skepticism, maybe even concern. But he couldn't let that deter him. Every ounce of doubt mirrored the hesitation that had haunted him for years. "We have thrived as an organization, but what we prioritize must reflect our conscience. I propose that we redefine our mission statement to focus not only on innovation and profit, but also on social responsibility and ethical commitment." As he went on, he felt the initial tension begin to shift. He spoke passionately about the impact of human connection within corporate environments, illustrating how fostering vulnerability led to mutual growth, engagement, and ultimately success. "While our past has shaped us, it does not have to control our future," he asserted, his conviction rising. To his surprise, as he concluded, several board members nodded. The acknowledgement sparked a moment of hope in him. Linda finally interjected, "David, your passion is evident, but how do you plan to shift the culture, especially considering the traditional mindset we operate under?" "By integrating feedback from all levels of the company, creating forums where ideas can be freely exchanged, and focusing on collaborative projects that bridge our growth with societal benefit," he offered confidently. We could even start with initiatives that resonate with our community, intertwining our corporate identity with the legacies we wish to honor. David looked around, gauging reactions. There was a stirring among them, a shift from skepticism towards something resembling intrigue. The possibility of meaningful transformation hung tantalizingly in the air. Linda exchanged thoughtful glances
with the others before leaning back in her chair, her expression now softer than before. I see your point. We may need to engage our employees differently. If they can see genuine actions aligning with values, it could change the narrative entirely. There it was, the affirmation he needed. David pressed forward, inspired by momentum. Imagine a company that educates its employees on ethical practices, inspiring everyone to enact real change. Think of the impact it could have, not only on the business, but on the community around us. The discussions flowed freely, dialogues no longer shackled by rigid expectations. Colleagues who once saw him only through the lens of profit now began to relate to him as a human being, wrestling with similar dilemmas of purpose. This inclusive atmosphere of dialogue fostered transformation. At one point, a senior executive hesitantly raised his hand. "David, this requires a commitment, one that will take time and effort. Are you ready for the sacrifices that come with such a change?" The weight of that question sank deep. Sacrifices. Yes, he resolved, his voice resolute. I am ready to confront the comforts of past success en route to something profoundly meaningful. I believe in what we can achieve together, embracing a culture where leadership is defined by authenticity and social responsibility. The meeting concluded with mixed reactions, but the seeds of a revolutionary mindset had been planted. David knew the road ahead would be jagged, requiring ongoing reflection and commitment. As he returned to his office, a text pinged from Emma. "You did it!" His chest swelled with pride, not from a place of ego, but genuine accomplishment. He was transforming, yes, but so was his company. They were on the brink of something great, built on the solid foundation of shared values. David took a moment to breathe, recognizing he had crossed a vital threshold, not just as a businessman, but as a leader committed to an impact that transcended numbers. His relationship with Emma had guided this change, morphing pain into purpose, blurring the line between personal and professional growth. Tomorrow held uncertainty, but he felt equipped to face it head-on, authentic, grounded, and unwavering. As David peered out the window again, the vastness of the city beckoned him, not with the weight of expectation, but with an invitation to rise as the best version of himself. Embracing every aspect of his journey, he understood that each step forward, even the missteps, would continue to define not only the leader he would become, but the man he now was. A man ready to embrace the world's vast potential, flaws and all. And with that realization, David stepped fully into his life, ready to face whatever challenges awaited, knowing that real success hinged on remaining connected to human experience, authenticity, and the ideals he held dear. The moment felt like a starting gun, echoing in the silence of his office, ready for the race ahead. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Every click makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this conclusion. Your insights matter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformative journey. Don't wait even one more second to support the channel and empower more stories of personal overcoming.